Alright, leaving where we last left off, America can't afford another Desert Storm. Shit, they can't even afford the missiles and everything else to even fight this war. They depleted all their stockpiles, so they're barely even fighting a war. Shalom, first and foremost, like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakah Kadash. Double honor to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, who are teachers of truth and sincerity, and a shout out to the Akims out there in the four corners of the earth proclaim this truth. Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakah Kadash, Barakatam. Make sure it's recording. Yeah, it is. And so, we're looking at a map here, the strategic areas of, indeed, the Valley of Jehoshaphat. We're looking at it right now. We're looking at this whole peninsula, this Persian Gulf, and pretty much so, prophecy is coming to pass right before our very eyes, and it's going to pick up very soon.
Yeah.
See if it gets back. Trying to get it to play. Okay, it just fucking stopped. Salakia, let me get it back. Alright, getting it back. Salakia. Sometimes the video goes out. That's why I run everything through VLC player as an alternative. Wait, make sure everything's here. Just a minute. Okay, here it is. Salakia. Had to fix the screen.
Preventing them from helping to tear the region apart.
Yeah, in fact, there's been a lot of bombing up in this quadrant here of late on the near Erbil and where a lot of the Kurdish areas are here, and also inside this territory, as far I think even into Syria.
Erbil was just hit.
Has been going after those. And I just wanted to go after here. This is the territory of Kuwait right here, and at least what Professor Morandi suggested that there could potentially be some movement here in the south, and one wonders also from the southeast. What do you know about what capabilities Kuwait has to defend itself on the ground?
Nothing significant. I mean, they purchased some equipment from us. I don't know how much of it is operational. I don't know how resolute the people inside the Kuwaiti defense establishment are. And the other thing is that they've started hitting some of these desalination plants, or I guess desalination plants. I don't remember how many there are, 5, 6, 7. But you begin to destroy those. You have, roughly 5 million people living there, depending upon these desalination plants. So it could end up being a situation where if they went in on the ground, and it would definitely come out of Iraq, there might not be much there to beat them.
And I was just thinking even about our time in that, our combat in that, not far from those locations there. And when I went back to Iraq in 2009, I think I did spend some time at Camp Bering in Kuwait, doing some training not far from where that map I was just showing you. And I remember there are, unless something has happened that I'm not aware of, there were literally no defenses up to the north. This is not like the Russia-Ukraine war where there's all these intricate fortifications and trenches and whatever else. It's just wide open dead that you can drive through. And what would be the military capacity of, let's say, I mean, we're just hypothetical speaking here. Let's say that these alleged 150,000 resistance fighters from Shia in Iraq, which are ostensibly part of the Iraqi security forces, so actually part of the state, if they broke away and said, no, we're going to move on here, from what you know, how hard would that task be for Kuwait to defend?
It's almost impossible. I know that King Abdullah from Jordan is now in the United Kingdom somewhere. That may be an indication of where things are headed in Jordan in the near future. I would imagine that the Al-Sabah family has packed its bags and headed to London or somewhere else. All of these places in the Gulf are very weak. These are not strong, cohesive societies. They don't maintain effective military establishments. We were looking a few years ago at what the average private in the UAE ground forces paid. I think it was something like the equivalent of $80,000 a year, plus whatever benefits are involved with that. Can you imagine that? And are you expecting these people to spend half of their day lying around at home, relaxing, and only spend perhaps half a day on active duty? I just don't see that happening. I don't see them doing much of anything. Everything is dependent upon us.
I also remember you and I were in the 2nd U.S. Cavalry in 1990. We were in Graphic Air Training Center doing a lot of training and exercises against what we thought was going to be a potential Soviet foe when, on August the 2nd of 1990, Saddam Hussein did invade into Kuwait and rolled all the way through, and basically they set up his forces on the southern side there. But at that time, we had a couple of divisions. I think George Bush sent the 101st and maybe the 82nd. I can't remember exactly who it was, but light fighters basically put a presence there. And then we all started moved up, and we had, I think, somewhere around 750,000 in the Army at that time. And all of our forces could go from Germany at that time and deploy into the 7th Corps. We went in there. Does such a force exist now? If anyone, whether Iran and or Iraq forces do that, can we do a Desert Storm 2 type operation today?
Well, obviously not. We were lucky that Saddam Hussein, frankly, made the decision he did to to effectively attack us. I mean, if it hadn't been for his decision to attack, I don't know that we'd have had much of an army, frankly, Dan, to fight with. If you recall, we had at the time almost 800,000 men in the United States Army. The Army was in a drawdown, and you had multiple divisions that had to be stripped out to bring the divisions we sent up to full strength. We weren't really ready, but the good news was that at least those of us who came from Europe were probably, I think, arguably in a higher state of training. But nevertheless, we were overtrained for the task, as you know, and we were very fortunate.
And what would happen if President Trump today was tempted to say, if an invasion happens, to say, I'm going to do my own Desert Storm, and I'm going to move a bunch of troops over there? Can we do that?
No, first of all, we live in a new world today, and you could never build a lodgment unless you had enormous quantities of air and missile defense that you could surround the so-called lodgment area where you would collect and organize the assembled forces. And at the time, one of the things that we discussed privately was if we ever have to come back again in the future, given the direction of technology, we'd probably have to land in a place like Yenbu on the Red Sea and then cross the desert, because if we tried to get into the Persian Gulf, we would be sunk or attacked or killed pretty rapidly. So a lot of people realized, I think more people realized the danger that would be presented in the future than we appreciate right now. Admiral Zabrowski certainly understood that, as did the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, whose name escapes me at the moment. But there were people that were thinking this through. But ultimately, Dan, I think the real lesson is this. Even though there were smart people at the helm, nothing really changed inside the force.
And you talk about if we land in Yendu, which is about right there on the map there, that would be 1,000 kilometers that we would have to travel just to get to the battle space area right there, as opposed to when you and I went in, we went to Al Jabail, which was right here. That would be literally impossible right now, with all of the Iranian firepower that they have all up and down this coast, for us to try and disembark with ro-ro ships and container ships to get our tanks and whatever else off the board here, just to drive up to Kuwait. That would be nearly impossible right now. In fact, it might be absolutely impossible. What do you think?
Completely, without question. No doubt about it. And, the tanks are still equipped with these turbine engines. And those things, as you know, drank fuel. And even though you have this auxiliary power unit that's supposed to reduce the amount of fuel that you consume, if you're moving, it doesn't make any difference how fast you move. You consume the gas at roughly, I think it was 8 hours, 7.5 to 8 hours, and you're on empty. I mean, that's 7 or 8 hours of operation. You can't fight a war that way. That's why the notion of committing these forces in a place like Ukraine is absurd. Ukraine is enormous. You can go a couple of 100 miles, and everybody's standing around waiting for tons of fuel to arrive. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, and in fact, it doesn't, whether it makes sense or not, we just don't have that capability anymore. So if that happens, the whole system is so much more vulnerable than it was in 1991. It's remarkable how less capable we are today. And I don't think President Trump keeps saying, and Secretary Hicks said 2 days ago, repeated, we're the most powerful military on the planet, and yet we couldn't even do a Desert Storm 2 because of our limited capability. That's the reality of it.
Yep, can't afford another Desert Storm 2. But Iran is not like Iraq. And like everything else, Kuwait is even easier to take over now. With all the bases destroyed there, there's nothing that they can do to stop it. But there's more. And this is from another brother, and he put up this video. Strategic Gathering of the Nations and End-Time Middle East Prophecies. So we're just going to play a little bit of this before we get into some more. Fair use, of course. We always put that disclaimer up as much as possible. Okay, that's a pretty long intro. Slovakia. Okay, here we go.
This is the book of 2 Ezra, chapter 16, and verse 33. And it reads, "The virgins shall mourn, having no bridegrooms. The women shall mourn, having no husbands. The daughters shall mourn, having no helpers. In the war shall their bridegrooms be destroyed, and their husbands shall perish of famine."
It's fucking sad. It's such a betrayal. This is not me saying this. This is the guys that are going to go over there in tier 1, tier 2 units that are joking around saying like, yeah, this isn't even for us. Everybody knows they're fighting for Israel. That's not a winning strategy. If they don't believe in what they're potentially going to do, which hopefully they're going to do nothing, but high probability they're going to do something, and they know it's not for the United States, fights out of the dog money, then you think they know that. I know they know that because I just had a going away party for one. That's all he was talking about. And it's fucking sad. It's such a betrayal.
All right, Shalom. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yehovah Shai, Bahasham Barakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who taught me this truth. Shalom to the hopeful elect. I'm back with another lesson through the Holy Spirit of the Barakwadash. This article here is from theguardian.com. Headline reads, "Shameful. Pentagon accused of cover-up over U.S. military casualties in Iran war." All right, so every day it just gets worse. Okay, and you can no longer lie to the people. Okay, people understand that thousands of troops, are dying over there in this war with Iran. Okay, so it's all coming out every day. And according to prophecy, this thing is escalating to the war of all wars, all right, World War III. So that death toll is only going to continue to climb, right? It says no press briefing has been held for months as the Defense Department belatedly or inaccurately releases figures, all right? So they continue to lie to the people now to downplay, how many soldiers are actually being put to death, right? Let's hit the summary real quick. Let's see what we get from it. All right, here we go. Let's let this pull 1 more second. Here we go. So it says here on the left in the summary, it says allegations of casualty cover-up, all right? Withheld information. Former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta and other experts accused the Pentagon of intentionally withholding the true number of U.S. casualties in the ongoing war with Iran to avoid public backlash, right? Because they know that people are going to uproar, okay? To avoid public backlash ahead of midterm elections. Casualty figures. The conflict has resulted in 18 U.S. troop deaths and approximately 430 injuries, right? So we know those numbers are flawed, okay? There's way more deaths than 18 troops, okay? Reporting discrepancies. The Pentagon faced scrutiny for delaying the disclosure of injury figures and for temporarily lowering the official death count on its website from 18 to 14, which a spokesperson blamed on data disruption, okay? It says unprecedented press restrictions, information blackout, okay, because everything that's being reported is all being, it's all controlled. All right, they're not going to give you the full truth. It says the Pentagon, now restyled as the Department of War, has not held a formal press briefing in 2.5 months. Okay, so they've been silent. Media ousting. Major news outlets were replaced by pro-administration media, and strict new rules led to a mass walkout by journalists on October 2025. Hostile environment. Recent policies include requiring journalists to be escorted on the grounds and declaring the press office as a classified space. Press freedom watchdogs call this the most hostile Pentagon environment in recent memory, right? Let's see what else we got. Yeah, so that's the point, man. So, hey, this thing, man, as we're going to get into, it's now it has shifted. I wouldn't say it's shifted, but now you're dealing with Iran, and now Russia and China are now involved. All right, and we'll get that too, because all this is just fulfilling prophecy. All right, Joel, the 3rd chapter of Ezekiel 38. Okay, all those prophecies come to mind. So going back here in 2 Ezra 16, in verse 34 again, it says, in the wars should the bridegrooms be destroyed, and their husbands shall perish of famine. Hear now these things and understand them, ye servants of the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahushai. Behold, the word of the Lord receded. Believe not the gods of whom the Lord spake. Behold, the plagues draw nigh, and are not slack. Okay? The end time prophecies, destruction, war, the return of the Lord, these things are not slacking. Verse 38. And when a woman with child in the 9th month bringeth forth her son with 2 or 3 hours of her birth, great pains can pass her womb, which pains when the child cometh forth, they slack not a moment. Okay? The child is about to be born. All right, which symbolizes, okay, nuclear war, World War III, the war of Armageddon, and the return of Yahweh Shem Yahushai. Okay? Destruction of Babylon the Great and the salvation of the Lord's elect. Okay? These things will play out. Verse 39. Even so shall not the plagues be slack to come upon the earth, and the world shall mourn, and sorrow shall come upon it on every side. All right, so let's get into it. Okay, now China and Russia are now involved. Let's grab that too. This is from Kim Iverson. Are they insane? Now war with China and Russia. All right, prophecy.
Well, I thought we were dumb enough getting into this war against Iran, but apparently we're going to add China and Russia to the mix because we just can't have enough, apparently. We've got a lot of people in the administration making a lot of moves that clearly look like they are ramping up for a World War III with China and Russia involved. So it would be China, Russia, Iran, probably several other countries joining in on this against the United States and Israel, because I don't know who else is going to join in. I mean, this could be one way that the U.S. gets the West into the war with Iran. The West doesn't want to get into the war. The European countries don't want to get into the war, but they would get into the war against Russia. And then who would get into the war against China? Japan would join in on that, perhaps. Taiwan, of course. And maybe we could get some other countries to go up against China. Maybe even India, if you bribe them enough. I'm not really sure how this all plays out, but it does seem like there is kind of this strategy building toward bringing these other countries into the war. And one thing that was really shocking, I don't know if you saw.
Yeah, that's the Lord. All right, let me get that. The strategy is Yahweh Shem Yahushai gathering the nations. All right, for this final battle. All right, Zephaniah 3 and Zephaniah 3 and 9. Okay. The Lord is strategically, putting the pieces of the puzzle together, right? This is Zephaniah 3. Bear with me. Zephaniah 3 and 8. And it reads, Therefore wait ye upon me, saith the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahushai, and to the day that I rise up to the prey. For my determination is to gather the nations. All right, this is the Lord's strategy, as she was saying. It's all spiritual. My determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, right? Is this not what the Lord is doing? He's assembling the nations together to pour out upon them my indignation, even all my fierce anger, for all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. All right, it's the Lord doing this now. Okay, NLT, therefore be patient, saith the Lord. Soon I will stand and accuse these evil nations, for I have decided to gather the kingdoms of the earth and pour out my fiercest anger and fury on them. All the earth will be devoured by the fire of my jealousy, right? So this is nuclear war. This is World War III. Here we are.
Get into the war against China, Japan would join in on that perhaps, Taiwan, of course. You maybe could get some other countries to go up against China, maybe even India, if you bribe them enough. I'm not really sure how this all plays out, but it does seem like there is kind of this strategy building toward bringing these other countries into the war. And one thing that was really shocking, I don't know if you saw this, but Laura Loomer, the big, she's got president's ear, and she's often going after people, and she gets what she wants quite a bit. And she recently, this was an interesting twist, but she had recently gone to Kiev, went on a trip to Ukraine, and has since flipped her stance on the Ukraine-Russia war. So she was one of those, hey, but let's not demonize Russia, let's end the war, let's do a deal. And now she's full-blown for Ukraine, and she's one that's got the president's ear. And I think she often represents kind of the trend of where things are going. So I think it's important to watch what she's doing and what she's saying, because like I said, she often gets what she wants. And if she's now saying, no, we have to support Ukraine, this is what's leading me to believe that we're now going to be adding the war against Russia and China in this. Here's Nikki Haley. We're seeing the warm up to this. Nikki Haley saying, it's important to remember that, yes, Iran struck our military bases and killed and injured many soldiers, but who is giving them the satellite imagery to do so? China and Russia. So we're going to start seeing a lot of the, let's just make a deal with Russia. We kind of did Russia dirty, and that's why they ended up invading Ukraine.
Yeah, like we told you, they were giving the intel to Iran, okay, on the bases and the soldiers and all of that. This is how they had the upper hand. This is why you're seeing reports of what? Of this cover-up of U.S. military casualties in Iran war, all right? This is part of them gaining the upper hand against America. You see? So this is all true.
Because we were saying we were going to expand NATO, we were doing all these things, and we're reasonable, we're willing to listen to them. That whole crowd is going to flip, and they're going to flip toward, no, we have to support Ukraine, we have to support the war. And the reason is going to be there's going to be a concerted effort from the think tanks who are going to put out millions and millions of dollars in order to convert all of these first, hey, let's do a deal with Russia and the war in Ukraine, converting them into, no, Russia is the bad guy that the Democrats claimed Russia was all of this time. That they're just as bad as China, and they're killing our American troops with their imagery, their weapons, their satellites, all of this are helping. And that is going to try to get the United States to ally, because that's really what, when you're building a world war, how do you go about doing it? You've got to get everybody's interests lined up together. Maybe everybody has different interests, but you can at least line them up on the same goal, right? And so you can say to the European nations, okay, you don't want to join in on the war against Iran, fine, fair enough, but you do want to join in against Russia. And then the Europeans say, yeah, okay. And they say, now, but we don't want to go up against China because the Europeans don't want to do that. And they say, well, yeah, but Russia. And so they can play everybody's hand, try to get everybody to feel like, okay, yeah, we have to do this.
So there you have it, though. Prophecy coming to pass. And you can catch more of this video by tuning into the channel. GMS Upon Precepts, easy name to find. As the whole video's there. But man, there's just so much that's happened this weekend that I had to put this into two parts. From the feed and all that. Saudi-led coalition bombs Yemeni port. Strikes on Hodeidah came after the Houthis attacked ships in the Red Sea. Now, there's even more than that, but this is part of it. The Saudi-led coalition struck targets on the Houthi-led Yemeni port of Hodeidah on Saturday following attacks on Saudi ships in the Red Sea. But what else got happened? Yeah, you already heard about Aramco, didn't you? Yeah, Aramco got hit. Saudi Arabia got hit hard, but this is how it got started. The Houthis that control large parts of civilian war-torn Yemen announced naval blockade against Saudi Arabia last week in response to what it called unjust siege of the country. Yeah, because they bombed their airports, so that's how this got started. So the group's political wing condemned the attacks and vowed to meet escalation with escalations according to Anullah. So, you can see some of what happened here. If this will play. Of course, Yemen struck back and hit Aramco, as well as more. So it's not a good outcome for Saudi Arabia if they blow everything up. And of course, you got King of Babylon himself, who's out of ammunition, threatening once again Trump says he will target Yemeni's Houthis if more tankers are targeted. Well, they stopped going after tankers. They went after Saudi Arabia themselves. They kicked some more ass, motherfucker. Year after United States attacked very powerfully the Houthis for their interference with commerce and trade by shooting at ships since that time, and during the conflict with Iran, they should have acted very reasonably. Unfortunately, they are starting up again. Trump wrote on Truth Social. Yeah, well, guess what? They hit you harder, motherfucker. Oh, and then you got this going on in Europe. Yeah. France orders the largest peacetime evacuation since World War II as wildfires rage. There's a plan to burn everything down. Kind of like you already know about the California plan, the Rothschild plan to burn California. Well, it's happening in Europe too. Thousands of firefighters battling fast-moving wildfires spread across Spain and France as extreme heat and strong winds forced more than 300,000 people to evacuate or shelter in place near Madrid. So they're deliberately, Valencia and Bordeaux. So these are large cities. These aren't even small cities. France has evacuated more than 220,000 people as the country's largest wildfire continues to spread across the southwest, threatening Bordeaux. Officials said the blaze has become so intense that it's generating its own winds. Yeah, I would say that most of these fires are you know what, but you can't say that, right? You know, but like everything else, though, you also got, again, everybody moving to a side, and the formation beginning, right? Because you got the Valley of Jehoshaphat, and you got the war in Europe, and then you got the war in Southeast Asia, aka against China. But this is the Third World War coming quickly, as we look at a few more here. So, meanwhile, back in the Ukraine, right? And the drones and a whole bunch of other stuff going on there, right? Everybody picking a side.
Russia has made its goal in the Black Sea plain to choke off Ukraine's access to the sea. The supply corridor that was once seen as relatively secure is no longer so.
Oh yeah, and Ukraine attacked
forces have carried out around 20 large-scale strikes on the ports of
Iran too.
And Yuzhny. These attacks have targeted infrastructure used to receive and store military cargo and fuel for the Ukrainian armed forces. Since July 11th alone, at least 28 vessels carrying military supplies and fuel have been hit. Maersk, the world's largest container shipping company, has suspended calls to Ukrainian ports. As of July 22nd, all major carriers have halted cargo operations due to the deteriorating security situation. Ukraine's Minister of Agrarian Policy, Vysotskyi, confirmed that the standstill is now in its fourth day. The financial impact is severe, an estimated $2 billion in monthly losses, according to Ukraine's Ministry of Agriculture. On the front lines, the situation is also developing unfavorably for Kiev. In recent days, most operations have taken place in the Kharkiv region. Near Zokachalopan, Russian aviation and rocket artillery disrupted a Ukrainian attempt to concentrate assault reserves in Makarove, Zlatnye, and Zolochiv. Assault units of Russia's 71st Guards Division, part of the North Brigade, drove forces of Ukraine's 159th Mechanized Brigade out of the village of Zakharivka in the Volshansk district. Notably, Ukrainian soldiers had held their positions without resupply for an extended period because their command refused to authorize a withdrawal. According to reports, commanders even threatened to deploy blocking units against anyone who tried to retreat. Attempts to slow the Russian advance with foreign mercenary units also failed. The number of missing Colombian fighters is increasing. During fierce fighting, combined units of Russia's 34th Guards Mountain Brigade and the 18th Division drove Ukraine's 129th Heavy Mechanized Brigade out of Ivashchenko, a village on the northwestern outskirts of the Kupiansk district. On July 23rd, the 34th Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade and the 11th Tank Regiment seized the village of Artelne. Further south, on the Sloviansk axis, units of the Russian Center Grouping captured Ilitsk. West of Pokrovsk, Russian advance units achieved a significant tactical gain near Sergivka, closing in on one of the key logistics hubs that underpins Ukraine's defenses in the sector. Ukraine is now under simultaneous pressure at sea, economically, and on the ground. Kiev is losing money, territory, and external support at the same time, and a change in the commander-in-chief alone is unlikely to alter that.
So that's what's going on there, and then there's, of course, more.
Well, more and more communities across the United States are starting to fight back against these AI data centers.
Yep.
Citizens are saying, not in my backyard. We don't want the noise, we don't want the tap on resources, taking away our water, our electricity use, increasing our overall bills. And this has now sparked a nationwide movement to try to stop these data centers across the United States. And the two men really leading the charge to reclaim
from
our future
5G to AI data centers.
Of these AI data centers. Derek Rose, investigative journalist, longtime friend of the show, and likewise Hakeem Anwar, the CEO of Abovephone, and the founder of AI Data Center Map, are leading this charge for a big event on August 1st, which is called Reclaim Our Future Day of Action Against AI Data Centers. And welcome to both of you. Thank you guys for being here.
Thanks for having us, Clayton.
So, Derek, why don't you set this up and explain what this August 1st date looks like, and why did you decide to do this?
Yeah, so as you were outlining there's more and more Americans across the country and really people around the world who are concerned about this issue of data centers, whether they're coming from, conservative ranchers concerned about their property or left-wing climate change activists, progressives who are concerned about environmental issues, and I think everything in between, people who may just be wholesale against AI use at all. And Hakeem and I both have been noticing this over the last few months and really see this as an opportunity to bring people together, maybe in a unique way that we haven't seen other than perhaps the flock cameras, that it seems like it is uniting left, right, politically, homeless, center, what have you, people across the board concerned about this and actually want to do something about it. And while there have existed other movements, including recently, who have called for days of action or protest, some of them are very focused on just conservatives or just focused on progressives. We wanted to have a day of action that was very focused on a nonpartisan, transpartisan movement. Whatever your political persuasion or lack thereof, this is a day for us all to come together and express your concerns. Again, whether they're environmental, whether they're about surveillance, whether they're about the noise pollution and all the variety of things going on related to these data centers. This is one day that we can put aside our differences and come together and really focus on this issue that impacts everybody.
Hakeem, you put together the data center map, and it is just, and when you see these little dots and you just can zoom into your area, your county, your backyard and see these data centers being built out, it's incredibly disheartening. So why did you want to be a part of this? Why did you want to join up with Derek and bring more awareness to this growing problem in the United States?
Well, this is such a big problem. It doesn't seem like there's any form of resistance that can come up against trillions of dollars of data center investment. I mean, that's what we spent 2025, $2.5 trillion. McKinsey and Company estimates we're going to spend another $5 trillion. So this money could be going towards nicer things. It could solve homelessness. It could build a nationwide high-speed rail network. But it's actually being built for AI data centers. They're going to suck up the land. They're going to suck up the water and power. And people
but the NDAA says
we've already gone
that Israel runs the United States.
People are already feeling the financial.
Pretty much what it means.
This is the final frontier for our natural resources. If we don't have our land, if we aren't able to bring up water to our land and supply the farmers, supply our own drinking water, what do we really have left? So we need to step up and actually do something. They like to kid around and say, hey, you're not going to need to work anymore because AI is going to take your job. Well, this is one place where we actually need people power. This AI can't come in and save us here. So the day of action is incredibly important. We already have a few different events around the country where people are coming together and educating each other. And I also released this new feature on the map, which allows you to contribute. So wherever you're at, I'll bring the map up here. And you can see if I go into Kansas or this area here, and I can actually add in information about a data center here. Now, the reason why this is important is because I've been tracking like 4,000 data centers. Honestly, I'm going a little bit crazy. I can't do this on my own. This is where we need people power, and this will allow us to decentralize our intelligence and actually coordinate to stop these data centers from being built, which there are victories we're seeing.
So there you are. Possibly on the 1st of August, we might see actual revolt against the new system, right? The New World Order. Yeah, you'll have some resistance, but this is still being built despite what people think. It's already been established that they don't care about what you think, and they only keep the illusion of elections just to give you the illusion. But that illusion is disappearing as Esau is becoming more exposed, and everybody knows that the votes, they don't count the votes, and it's a shit show. At least a good portion of people realize that. There's still enough retards out there that believe in this election system. Then you got this going on, the MOTB, ultimately this newer wheelchair, as this brother goes into.
First and foremost, I'm going to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rachaha, Wadash, double honest, and the head apostle, and that is a great millstone, who rule well and teach well. This is about the dive from the GMS Virginia camp, coming to the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai. Yahweh being the true, holy, and powerful name of the Heavenly Father. Yahweh Shai being the true, holy, and powerful name of His only begotten Son, whom this world annually calls Jesus and Christ. Bahashem is in the name. And Lord willing, this will be a fine lesson. There's going to be another MOTB discussion. I'm going to touch on this video that you see on the screen. I'll put the link in the description box as well. Entitled Telepathic Wheelchair Control. And this is coming from the Neuralink YouTube channel, right? And I'm going to play this video, and we're going to touch on some things in this video concerning Esau's micro C-hip technology. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this. As fair use, fair use.
Files, we've been working really hard to give the world a brain-computer interface powered wheelchair. It's designed to unbrain controlling the wheelchair physically by translating the neural signals so they can control the wheelchair with their mind. What we've done here is we've developed a set of custom electronics to take cursor movements from a participant's imagined motions, translate them into analog signals, and use them to directly drive and control all the functionalities of the wheelchair. This is the wheelchair control app, and we built a custom UI for our users. I can now move my cursor up and slowly move the wheelchair forward, or turn to the side, left or right. And as I get more and more into the ring, it'll go faster and faster. Really, we built this system with safety in mind. As you can see, if I let go, the cursor is slowly going back to the center. So that way, if a user ever becomes incapacitated, they won't go driving directly into a wall. The cursor will allow them to go back to the center here.
In the beginning, driving the wheelchair with my Neuralink, it was a little stop and go. But after a few minutes, it became kind of second nature. The difference between operating a wheelchair via the Neuralink and joystick. The joystick requires my head to be hunched over, and it hurts tremendously. Driving the wheelchair wheelchair with my Neuralink, I can be in an upright position that is a good posture without being in a state where I'm in pain. It's very rewarding and satisfying.
We built this from the ground up to provide a completely new interface for controlling the wheelchair. And we believe that this is just a start of helping restore mobility to everyone who's lost it.
So there you have it. You know, under the umbrella of health and science, under the umbrella of helping people who, you know, quote unquote, need help and have disabilities, Esau is gradually pushing micro-CF technology upon the people and getting people more and more accustomed and acclimated to this type of technology, right? And we're starting to see more and more of these testimonials of these individuals with the Neuralink. You know, it started out with a monkey playing video games with his mind, you know, to an actual human surgically, robotically getting one of these Neuralinks wired to the mainframe of their brain, and being able to be hooked up to the grid, so to speak, you know, control things around their home. You know, you even have individuals that weren't sick, but are completely healthy, receive the Neuralink. That Jake, I forgot his name, you know, received the Neuralink, and he's spoken so highly of it, you know, speaking how it benefited his life, and he said that this is the future, and he was correct. This is the future, and this is the future that, you know, from the apostles and elders of Great Millstone on down, we've been warning you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans about, right? Because if you receive one of these devices, whether you get the Neuralink, which the majority of Jake aren't going to get the Neuralink, all right, or you get the conventional method, the so-called conventional method of receiving a micro-CF in somewhere else on your body, whether it's your hand, your arm, whatever the case may be, there's a great judgment for that, and there's no repenting from receiving the MOTB, which is the micro-CF, right? And we told you we're going to start seeing more and more testimonials coming from individuals concerning this technology. Now they have a telepathic wheelchair that you can control with your mind. Okay, you heard this individual said he used to have to control his wheelchair with some type of joystick that he had to put in his mouth, being paralyzed. But now via the Neuralink technology, he can control his wheelchair telepathically via his Neuralink. He can just think where to go, stop, go right, left, you know, whatever the case may be. Now let's get this definition of gradualism real quick. This is gradualism: the principle of achieving major goals or seeing change occur through slow, steady, and incremental steps rather than through sudden, drastic, or revolutionary leaps, right? And we've seen this with our very eyes, and, you know, even outside of, you know, micro-CF technology, etc. You know, Esau uses this process very, very well to get the people to fall in line, to fall in order, to accept his orders, to accept his various different laws, his policies, okay? For them to become more and more acceptable to something that previously they would not have been so acceptable to. We've seen it come from the fiat currency to people using credit, debit cards, to people using a chip on those credit and debit cards, to people just swiping with their phone. So it's going to be a very, very easy, so to speak, transition for these people to take a micro CF in their hand. It says steady and incremental steps rather than through sudden, drastic, and revolutionary leaps. Now let's go into the politics and society, you know, referring to gradualism, right? It says gradualism refers to the policy or belief that social, institutional, and political reform is best achieved in small, discrete increments. It relies on compromise and controlled transitions over time rather than abrupt uprisings or revolutions. Okay? So slowly but surely, little by little, you know, Esau is pushing this upon the masses, right? From various different apps linked to the Neuralink, to be able to control your wheelchair, to being able to control your vacuum at your house, to be able to open, shut your door, and turn your lights off. You know, individuals with, you know, ALS and individuals with these various different diseases, which ultimately Esau is the corporate of these various different diseases. You know, he puts stuff in your food, he puts stuff in your water, he has you get shot up by certain injections till you come out fucked up. And then he tries to come in like the knight in shining armor, you know, the so-called save the day. Oh, you can't use your legs, your arm don't work. Oh, you can't see. Oh, well, no problem. You know, just take this Neuralink, just take this device, we're going to hook it up to your brain. Now you're able to do all these things. Now you're able to walk again, you're able to use these bionic arms. Okay, you're able to move your wheelchair around, you're able to be more independent. Now you can be at your house alone and you can do all the various different things that you weren't able to do. You might have needed 1 or 2 people to help you periodically through the week. Now you don't need that no more, right? You know, this people are going to look at these devices and this technology, you know, as a miracle on earth. And the scriptures speak about his false miracles, right? And let's get Romans the 13th chapter real quick, because you got a lot of our people that are, you know, still, you know, ignorant, and some of them willingly ignorant to what the MOTB is. You know, you got individuals that call themselves teachers that are telling you the MOTB is sin, sleeping with white woman, embargo, you know, sending all its forms, all these various different things. You even got individuals that are saying it's eating bad, you know, bad health, and, you know, eating bad foods and shit. You know, and it's constantly changing. You know, let's go to Romans. So I can bear with 1 moment. Let's go to Romans 13. Let's go down to verse 11. This is Romans 13:11 says that knowing the time, that now it is high time to wake out of sleep, and the majority of our people are asleep. The majority of our people are ignorant to the fact that if and when they take that micro-CF on their body, you know, or they get a Neuralink, whatever the case may be, which we know the majority of Jake ain't gonna get no Neuralink, right? That it's going to result in their destruction pursuant to Revelation, the 14th chapter, the 9th verse on down. Okay.
And that destruction is being caught in World War III when America is taken out by nuclear destruction. As you can see, it has emerged in the war. It fights for the Israeli state. The Zionist entity runs both Babylon and, of course, it runs pretty much everything that King Bibi says. You may as well call King Bibi the president of the U.S. You know, basically, you call him King. You know, the king is Bibi. Trump is the president, and then you got a vice president, right? But the main one giving the commands is he's going to be here this week, I think on Tuesday. But we also call it Taco Tuesday, right? Because Trump says a lot of things and then backs down. Betting on Taco Tuesday. Oil slides despite unraveling diplomacy in Iran. Trump warns China and Russia. Diplomacy signals emerge. Pakistan is reportedly exploring renewed U.S.-Iran talks, while Trump is set to meet King Bibi next week amid the escalating conflict. War continues with 13th straight night of bombing. U.S. carried out a 13th straight night of strikes against Iran, as well as Tehran launched fresh attacks against U.S.-linked targets in Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, and Iraq. And then you also got what the Houthis did, retaliated against Saudi Arabia. And, like everything else, Trump's going in even further. Trump warns Russia and China. Trump cautioned China and Russia against supplying arms or targeting help to Iran. So there you go. Talking big, right? Talking hellish shit. And you have this. Trump threatens to carry out the biggest attack yet on Iran, but you can bet on Taco Tuesday that he'll somehow back down. I am considering massive attack, Trump told Axios reporter Bhavik Ravi. Bigger than ever before, I am close to making a decision. We're all set for it. But he's holding it off until he meets with King Bibi. So here we go. Trump shelves Iran strike over U.S. missile shortage. You got that problem too. U.S. President Trump has held off major attack against Iran over concerns that the Pentagon is running low on air defense missiles. New York Times reports citing so they can't defend the Israeli state. And they definitely can't defend their bases. Two sides have exchanged strikes for nearly 2 weeks since the ceasefire breached and spring collapsed, accusing each other of violating the 14-point memorandum of understanding. So, pretty much so, he's holding it off. Waiting to see what his new orders are from King Bibi. Trump pursues diplomatic off-ramp as Omani delegation arrives in Tehran. Axios reports that President Trump called off new U.S. military strikes on Friday night, signaling a potential diplomatic off-ramp after nearly 2 weeks of tit-for-tat attacks. So, waiting for King Bibi to come. So, there's a pause, but is there? U.S. pauses Iran bombing campaign as Saudi Houthi Red Sea front erupts. So, like everything else, though, well, you had a lot going on between Yemen and Saudi Arabia. Iran condemns Ukraine over reckless cargo ship attack, and you had Ukraine attack a ship in the Caspian Sea, which is near the Black Sea, over on the north of Iran. Iran condemned Ukraine's strike against cargo ship in the Caspian Sea that killed one sailor and injured another. Iran Foreign Ministry condemned the attack, saying it risked further fueling and expanding the flames of war. It urged other nations to take responsible stance towards this reckless action by the Ukraine regime and hold its leadership accountable. So, like everything else, the only one putting Ukraine in check has been Russia. So you see, common interests there. Iran, Oman, hold Hormuz talks as U.S. pauses airstrikes for the second day. This pause offers a clear signal yet for a diplomatic off-ramp may be emerging, with Iranian and Omani officials reporting progress in talks to reopen the critical waterway. So here we go again. Fire a little, back off a little. Fire a little, back off a little bit. Make no mistake about it, that's all it's ever going to be until the Third World War happens, until it goes into full effect. U.S. warns citizens in Iraq of potential attack against American interests. But guess what? Most Iraqis are fucking tired of the U.S. and their country and want them out, you know? And like everything else, though, all these fucking U.S. terrorists have done is kidnap and rape people in their homes, you know? And the list goes on and on of the atrocities committed by the U.S. terrorists, a.k.a. the troops. So they want them out of there. If anything, they would probably help Iran to hunt them down and kill them. U.S. missions in Iraq warn American terrorists. Oh, okay, the terrorists. Okay, I get it. Okay, the American terrorists that are there Friday to remain vigilant and amid this escalated regional tensions. Security situation remains complex with a potential for unexpected escalation. U.S. Embassy in Baghdad and Consulate General in Erbil said in joint security alert, basically telling these Edomites to watch out. Yeah, you better watch out, because guess what? You killed Iran's leader, and you're helping to form terrorism against Iran, and you're also a terrorist threat against Iraq. So yeah, you better fucking watch out, fucking punk. That's what they're really saying. Just translating a little bit of the language here. How Israeli dream of being the Middle East trade hub is unraveling. Gulf powers are working out new quarters that would bypass the need to exchange with Tel Aviv. You know, to bypass it completely. In other words, this Greater Israel project, well, they're finding a new one. The India, West Asia, Europe economic corridor has died at its Israeli end. Gulf states and their allies are now racing to build rival lines. In June, the Saudi and Turkish transport ministers signed memoranda to revive the Ottoman-era Hejaz Railway as a corridor connecting the nations via Jordan and Syria. Rooted deliberately around Israeli state, and the United Arab Emirates has opened talks on a trade route for the Syrian coast through Iraq to its own Gulf ports, pretty much cutting out Tel Aviv altogether. Both initiatives bypassed the IMEC, which was involved at the G20 summit in New Delhi in September 2023, 4 weeks before the Gaza war started, and whose entire premise was Haifa at the gateway to Europe. Its backers still call it pause, but it is still being built, and its place sketches a regional order where trade is routed through everyone except Israeli state. See, they're fucking tired of the Zionist entity running everything, and they want to have new trade, and that's what they're really talking about. So like everything else, though, well, you know, they're going to go to war, right? You know, war is in their hearts. So I'm going to get some scriptures to close this out. Hopefully this has been edifying. So we're in the time now where these Babylonians, these Edomites, are turning against each other, because we know that this is the place of Sodom and Egypt spiritually. Has the sins of Sodom, and yet is this place of Egypt. So like everything else, though, it really should say Edomite against Edomite, but nonetheless, though, Egypt is another term for hardcore bondage, and we are certainly serving that over here. You know, ain't no greater place of bondage than living in America. You know, it's not as happy as James Brown puts it out. You know, that's a false narrative. Even though we've been ruled with a rod of iron, you know, and a cruel master has been over us this entire time, yet we sing out the songs and everybody enjoys listening to them. You know, like James Brown, etc., right? But, you know, we're going to jump for even more joy when we escape this kingdom, right? You know, don't be fooled. Just because we still can put out a good song with happiness and joy doesn't mean we're in happiness and joy. I guess we just learn to deal with it, right? We know that nobody has bought us, right? You know, nobody saved us from this. We're still living in captivity, but the days of our captivity are just about up. Esau's being exposed every day, and they're turning against each other, right? August 1st, they don't want any fucking, you know, AI centers. They know what this means. It means it's death to their jobs, death to farmlands, just the death to everything economically. It's destroying and killing the economy, and they don't want it. Isaiah chapter 19, verse 2. And I will make Egyptian fight against Egyptian, brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor, city against city, province against province. Yeah, division on everything, right? Yeah, it's going to fall apart. A house that is divided will not stand. And these people are divided more and more on everything. With this right-left paradigm, etc. The Egyptians will lose heart. And I will confuse their plans. They will plead with their idols for wisdom. Yeah, they're going to look to Trump, or they're going to look to the Democrats, they're going to look to the elections, and call in spirits, mediums, and those who consult the spirits of the dead. You may as well call it what you see it, man. The mediums. The mediums is the media now. You know, so look at it that way. They'll be looking to their news, hoping that things change within the next election. And I will hand over to a hard, cruel master. A fierce king will rule them. And that's talking about Trump. And you could say King Bibi, who rules America, because the NDAA puts King Bibi in charge, a.k.a. the Prime Minister of Israel is in charge of Babylon. Says the Lord of heaven's armies, you know, Yahweh Shai. The waters of the Nile will fail to rise and flood the fields. The riverbed will be parched and dry, meaning that there ain't going to be any mirth whatsoever left in the land, you know, and a famine unlike any other. The canals of the Nile will dry up, and the streams of Egypt will stink with rotting reeds and rushes. Well, it's pretty much that's what these AI data centers are doing. That's why the people are rising up, you know, and pretty much there will be no flax for the harvesters, no threads for the weavers. They will be in despair, and all the workers will be sick at heart. Yeah, because pretty much most people are living paycheck to paycheck, but their paycheck doesn't even pay for everything, right? They have to put other bills off just to pay for other bills, you know? And it's a struggle, you know? Pennies on the dollar, etc. And hyperinflation. So ultimately leading to their main destruction, which is this place being consumed by fire. So we're watching the downfall of Babylon right before our eyes. So hopefully this has all been edifying. You know, hadn't put it into two parts because there was so much more to cover. And we're going to see a lot more as King Bibi is set to arrive this week. Then we'll say Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash, Wa Abal Babal. Brakatam, Jehovah elect, Shalom.